The November morning broke cold and gray over Miller's Creek, Montana. The kind of morning that made people pull their collars tight and hurry from one warm place to another. Heads down, breath visible, wanting nothing more than coffee and silence. In a small apartment on the east side of town, Sophie Delacroix woke to an empty house. Again. Her mother's bed was already made, the sheets pulled tight with military precision. A note on the kitchen counter, same as always, written in Grace's hurried nurse's handwriting. Double shift. Leftover lasagna in fridge. Love you. Be safe. Be safe. Sophie stared at those two words like they were a joke. A cruel one, c'était my throne. She sat on the edge of her bed, the phantom pain shooting through her left leg. The leg that wasn't there anymore. 6 years and her brain still hadn't accepted the truth. Every morning the same confused signals. Every morning the same moment of forgetting, then remembering. The hit and run had taken more than her leg. It had taken her father too, though he'd walked away on both of his. 3 months after the accident, after the surgeries and the crying and the medical bills that never stopped coming, he'd looked at Sophie with tired eyes and said the words that cut deeper than any surgeon's knife. I didn't sign up for this. I can't handle a broken kid. And then he was gone. Sophie pulled herself up, reaching for the crutches that leaned against her nightstand. The apartment was small, cramped, the kind of place people lived when they had no choice. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing. The heating was inconsistent, but it was theirs, and Grace worked herself to exhaustion to keep it that way. Sophie moved through her morning routine with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Bathroom, sink, the mirror showing a face she barely recognized anymore. 16 years old, but her eyes looked older. Tired. Pale skin that rarely saw sunlight. Dark hair that needed cutting. The face of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. Most days she stayed home. Homeschooling was easier, safer, no hallways to navigate with everyone staring. No gym class where she had to sit on the sidelines. No cafeteria where eating alone announced to everyone exactly how alone she was. But today something stirred in Sophie's chest. Something small and fragile like the first crack in ice before spring. A rebellion, a tiny, desperate need to feel normal, to feel like a regular 16-year-old girl, even if just for an hour. She wanted to go to Miller's diner. The decision terrified her, but she made it anyway. Sophie dressed carefully, choosing jeans that fit over her prosthetic, a loose sweater, a jacket. She checked her phone. No messages. She hadn't expected any. Friends were a luxury from another life before the accident, before the homeschooling, before she'd learned that the world had very little patience for broken things. She grabbed her sketchbook, her pencils, her small backpack. Took a breath, another. Then she opened the door and stepped into the cold November air. The walk to Miller's diner took 20 minutes. Every step on crutches was a negotiation with gravity, with balance with the cold that made her hands stiff. Sophie kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with the few people she passed. An old woman walking a dog, a man getting into his truck. They didn't look at her. She preferred it that way. Miller's diner sat on the corner of 3rd and Main, a squat brick building with a faded sign and windows that fogged up from the heat inside. It had been there since the 1950s, a permanent fixture in a town where not much ever changed. Sophie paused outside, her heart hammering. She could still turn back. Go home. Be safe. But that word again. Safe. It had started to feel like a cage. She pushed open the door. The bell above jingled loud and cheerful, and every head in the diner turned. It was instinct, that turning, but Sophie felt each gaze like a weight. The moment stretched awkward and exposing until people slowly returned to their coffee, their newspapers, their conversations. Sophie, Rita Mae Donovan, stood behind the counter, a dish rag over her shoulder, her face breaking into a genuine smile. Rita was 58, round and warm, with graying red hair pulled back in a practical bun. She'd owned Miller's diner for 15 years since her husband died and left her with a choice between selling or running it herself. She'd chosen to run it. "Sweetheart, I haven't seen you in months. Come here, let me look at you." Sophie made her way to her usual booth in the back corner, the one with the cracked red vinyl and the view of the parking lot. Rita followed, already knowing what Sophie would order. "Chocolate milkshake." Sophie nodded, managing a small smile. "Please." Coming right up, honey. Rita squeezed Sophie's shoulder as she passed a small gesture of warmth that made Sophie's throat tighten. Kindness had become so rare that even the smallest amount felt overwhelming. Sophie settled into the booth, arranging her crutches beside her, pulling out her sketchbook. Drawing was her escape, the one thing that made sense when nothing else did. She opened to a blank page and began to sketch her pencil, moving in soft, careful strokes. She always drew hands, never faces, never full people, just hands. Hands holding things, hands reaching, hands at rest. She'd filled dozens of sketchbooks with nothing but hands, and she couldn't explain why, even to herself. Maybe because hands were safe. They couldn't judge you with their eyes. They couldn't sneer or whisper or look away in disgust. Rita returned with a milkshake, tall and perfect whipped cream piled high, a cherry on top. On the house, Rita said, her voice gentle. Rita, you can't keep. I absolutely can. Now drink up. You're too skinny. Sophie wrapped her fingers around the cold glass, feeling the condensation against her palms. The first sip was perfect, sweet and rich and normal. For a moment, just a moment, she felt like a regular teenage girl in a regular diner on a regular Tuesday morning. The moment didn't last. The bell above the door jingled again. Sophie's stomach dropped before she even looked up. She knew those voices. Everyone in Miller's Creek knew those voices. Tyler Brennan and Cole Hendricks walked in like they owned the place. Because in a way they did. When your father was the sheriff, when you were 17 and tall and cruel, when the whole town looked the other way, because confronting you meant confronting power, then yeah, you owned every space you walked into. Tyler was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if it wasn't twisted with constant arrogance. His father's son through and through. Cole was shorter, thinner, always in Tyler's shadow, always laughing at Tyler's jokes whether they were funny or not. They were loud. They were always loud, laughing, shoving each other, making sure everyone knew they'd arrived. Sophie tried to disappear into her booth. She hunched her shoulders, kept her eyes on her sketchbook, made herself as small as possible. Please don't notice me. Please don't notice me. Please don't. Well, well, well. Tyler's voice cut through the diner's ambient noise like a blade. Look who decided to come out of hiding. Sophie's pencil froze on the page. She didn't look up. If she didn't look up, maybe he'd get bored. Maybe he'd leave her alone. Hey, I'm talking to you. Cole laughed, that high-pitched, eager laugh of someone desperate to please. The diner had gone quiet. That particular kind of quiet that meant everyone was listening but pretending not to. The coward's quiet. The complicit quiet. Sophie's hands started to shake. Tyler crossed the diner in 4 long strides. He stopped at her booth, looming, his shadow falling across her sketchbook. Drawing again? Let me see. He reached for the sketchbook. Sophie pulled it away, clutching it to her chest. It's nothing, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nothing, then why hide it? Tyler's grin was sharp and mean. Come on, share with the class. Leave her alone, Tyler. Rita's voice came from behind the counter, stern but not quite firm enough. There was a tremor in it, a fear. Tyler glanced at Rita, his smile widening. Just being friendly, Rita. That okay with you, being friendly? Rita's mouth opened, then closed. She looked away. The betrayal of that looking away hurt more than any words. Tyler turned back to Sophie, and now his eyes dropped deliberately, obviously, to her legs. To the one that was there and the one that wasn't. So, he said loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Where's the other one? Cole laughed again, louder this time. What happened? Sophie lose it? Or just too lazy to bring it? Sophie's face burned. Her whole body burned. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to scream. But all she could do was sit there, frozen silent, hating herself for being silent, but unable to find her voice. Tyler reached out and tapped the edge of her milkshake glass with one finger. Nice drink. Looks expensive. Who's paying for that? Your mom working double shifts at the hospital, right? That's what I heard. Killing herself to take care of her broken little girl. Something inside Sophie cracked. She looked up, met Tyler's eyes, and for just a second, she saw something there. Something that looked almost like guilt, almost like pain. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cruel grin. And then Tyler's hand shot out and slapped the milkshake off the table. The glass hit the floor and exploded. The sound was deafening in the quiet diner. Glass shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. Chocolate and cream spread across the worn linoleum like a stain. The cherry rolled under a nearby table. Sophie flinched back, her heart hammering, her breath coming in short gasps. And before anyone could move, before anyone could speak, Tyler's other hand came up and slapped Sophie hard across the face. The sound of it echoed. Sophie's head snapped to the side. Her cheek exploded in pain. Tears sprang to her eyes, hot and immediate. For a moment, the diner was utterly frozen. Rita gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. An old man in the corner muttered, "Jesus Christ." But nobody moved. Nobody stood. Nobody intervened. Tyler and Cole stood there for 3 more seconds, staring down at Sophie, and then they turned and walked out. Still laughing, still loud, still untouchable. The door closed behind them with a cheerful jingle. Sophie sat in the booth, her face on fire, tears streaming down her cheeks. She could feel the red marks spreading across her skin, could taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. The diner remained silent, not the shocked silence anymore. Now it was the shameful silence. The "we saw but did nothing" silence. Rita hurried over, kneeling beside the booth, her own eyes wet. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But her apology felt hollow, because she'd looked away. They all had. Sophie tried to stand, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip her crutches. The room spun. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. She needed to leave, needed to get out before she completely fell apart. "Honey, wait, let me—" "I'm fine," Sophie whispered. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She would never be fine again. She made it to her feet, crutches slipping slightly on the spilled milkshake and broken glass. Rita reached out to steady her, and Sophie led her, hating herself for needing the help, hating herself for coming here, hating herself for existing. "Thank you." Sophie managed the words coming out choked. She gathered her sketchbook, her backpack, and moved toward the door. Every eye in the diner followed her, but nobody spoke. Nobody asked if she was okay. Nobody offered to walk her home. She pushed through the door into the cold November air. Outside, she could hear Tyler and Cole in the parking lot still laughing. The sound of their bikes starting up. Regular bikes, not motorcycles, but the sound was still harsh and grating. Sophie stood there on the sidewalk, her whole body shaking. She couldn't go home yet. If she went home like this, Grace would see, and Grace would cry. And then Grace would try to fix it, and there was no fixing this. There was no fixing any of this. Sophie lowered herself onto the bench outside the diner, her crutches clattering beside her. She put her face in her hands and cried. Not the quiet, dignified crying of movies. The ugly crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. The kind that sounded like an animal in pain. She cried because of the slap, because of the milkshake, because of Tyler's words. But mostly she cried because this wasn't new. This was her life. This had been her life for 6 years. And she was so tired. She didn't know how long she sat there. The cold seeped through her jacket, through her jeans, into her bones. Her tears eventually slowed, not because she felt better, but because she'd simply run out. She stared at the gray sky, at the bare trees, at the empty street, and she wondered not for the first time if it would be easier to just stop, to just give up, to just let the darkness that was always hovering at the edges finally swallow her whole. She was still sitting there, hollow and numb, when she heard it. The sound of engines, deep and rumbling and powerful. Sophie looked up. 5 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot of Miller's Diner. Real motorcycles this time. Big ones. Harley's chrome gleaming even under the gray sky. The kind that made the ground vibrate when they passed. The kind that made people stop and stare. The bikes pulled into a neat row and shut off one by one. The sudden silence felt profound. 5 men dismounted. They were big, all of them, dressed in leather jackets despite the cold. Jeans and boots, tattoos visible on forearms and necks, beards and long hair, and the kind of presence that made you take a step back without thinking. But it was the man in front who caught Sophie's attention. He was older than the others. 60, maybe more. Silver streaked through his dark beard. His face was weathered, lined, the kind of face that had seen things and survived them. But his eyes were what held her. They were kind, tired but kind. He glanced at Sophie as he passed, and something in his expression shifted. A flicker of recognition, though they'd never met. A flicker of concern. Then he and his crew pushed through the door into Miller's diner, and Sophie was alone again. She should leave. She should go home. But something made her stay. Some instinct she didn't understand. Some small voice that said, wait, so she waited. Inside Miller's diner, Raymond Thorne stood just past the threshold, letting his eyes adjust to the interior light. The place was warm, smelled like coffee and bacon and old grease. Familiar. Comforting. Gentlemen, welcome to Miller's. The woman behind the counter was forcing a smile, but Ray could see the tension in her shoulders. Something had happened here. Recently. Coffee for all of you, Ray nodded. Coffee. And pie if you've got it. We've had a long ride. His crew, the Iron Brotherhood, spread out, claiming a large booth near the window. Marcus Callahan, 45, lean and sharp-eyed. Garrison Bear Wolf, 52, built like a mountain with the temperament of a teddy bear. Tommy Vance and Jesse Brooks, both in their 40s, both solid men who'd been riding with Ray for over a decade. They were on their way to Bozeman for a charity ride. Children's Hospital, teddy bears and smiles, and reminding sick kids that the world still had good people in it. They'd stop for coffee and pie. But Ray couldn't shake the image of the girl on the bench outside. 16 maybe, dark hair, crutches, and a red mark across her face that was fresh, very fresh. Ray settled into the booth, his bad leg aching from the ride. 15 years since the crash, and he still felt every mile. But the pain was a reminder. He'd survived. He'd healed mostly. He'd found purpose. The waitress Rita brought over a pot of coffee and started pouring. Y'all passing through. Headed to Bozeman, Ray said, his voice gravelly from the wind. Charity ride. That's real nice of you. Rita's hands trembled slightly as she poured. Ray watched her, then glanced around the diner. People were eating, but there was a tension in the air. Something unspoken. He leaned forward slightly. Ma'am, is everything okay here? Rita's face crumpled just for a second before she caught herself. It's fine. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. Ray had spent 64 years on this earth, 25 of them in the Marines, and he knew when someone was lying. He glanced at Bear, who'd noticed too. Bear gave a subtle nod toward the corner booth. Ray looked. There was broken glass on the floor, a puddle of what looked like a milkshake half cleaned, a chair pushed back at an odd angle like someone had left in a hurry. What happened over there? Ray asked quietly. Rita followed his gaze, and her expression tightened. She opened her mouth closed. It looked around like she was checking if anyone was listening. Then she leaned in close. Some boys came in earlier, local kids. They heard a girl, a disabled girl. She didn't do anything, didn't say anything to them. They heard her, and nobody stopped them. Ray's jaw clenched. Where is she now? Outside, last I saw, on the bench. Ray stood up so fast his coffee nearly spilled. The rest of the Brotherhood looked at him, reading his body language, understanding immediately. Stay here, Ray said. Order me a slice of apple pie. He walked out of the diner, the bell jingling cheerfully above him, mocking the situation with its brightness. The girl was still on the bench, hunched over, arms wrapped around herself. She looked small, fragile, broken. Ray's chest tightened. For a moment, just a flash, he saw Emma, his daughter. 13 years old, sitting on her bed, trying to tell him about the kids at school who were making her life hell. And Ray, fresh back from deployment, still in warrior mode, still thinking the world was about toughness and grit, had told her to be stronger, to fight back, to not let them see her cry. 3 weeks later, Emma had hung herself with his Marine Corps belt. 23 years ago, and the guilt still felt fresh. Ray approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When he was a few feet away, he cleared his throat gently. Excuse me, miss? Sophie's head snapped up, her eyes red-rimmed and wary. She clutched her crutches like weapons. I don't mean to intrude, Ray said, keeping his voice soft. I saw you sitting out here, wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine. The lie was automatic, practiced. Ray studied her face. The red mark was already darkening into a bruise. Handprint clear as day. Doesn't look fine to me, he said, but there was no judgment in his voice. Just observation. Sophie's lip trembled. She looked away, staring hard at the parking lot. What's your name? Ray asked. A long pause. Then barely audible, Sophie. Sophie, I'm Ray. He gestured to the bench. Mind if I sit? She shrugged, which he took as permission. He lowered himself onto the bench beside her, keeping a respectful distance, close enough to talk, far enough to not crowd. They sat in silence for a moment. Ray didn't push. He'd learned too late with Emma, but not too late for everyone else, that sometimes people just needed presence. Not words, not solutions, just someone willing to sit with them in their pain. Finally, Sophie spoke, her voice hollow. "Why do you care?" Ray looked out at the street. "I had a daughter once, Emma. She'd be 36 now if she'd lived." Sophie glanced at him, surprised. "She was bullied," Ray continued. "Bad, and I didn't listen. I didn't protect her. I thought I was teaching her to be tough, but what I really did was teach her she was alone." His voice cracked on that last word. "She killed herself when she was 13. Used my belt to do it. I found her." Sophie's breath hitched. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Ray turned to look at her, meeting her eyes. "Every day for 23 years, I've been sorry. And every day I look for chances to do what I didn't do for her. To listen, to protect, to stand up." He nodded toward her face. That mark didn't come from falling. Sophie's hand moved unconsciously to her cheek. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. "The woman inside Rita, she told me what happened. Said some boys hurt you. Said nobody stopped them on." Sophie's eyes filled with tears again. "They never do. Nobody ever stops them." "Well," Ray said quietly, "that ends today." Sophie looked at him, confused and disbelieving and desperate all at once. "You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're 16. I know you're sitting out here in the cold because you're too scared to go home and let your mama see that bruise. I know you're carrying more pain than anyone your age should have to carry. And I know that the world has been real unkind to you." He paused, then added softly, "I also know that you're stronger than you think, because you're still here, still fighting." "That takes strength." Sophie shook her head. "I'm not strong. I'm pathetic. I just sit there and let them hurt me." "Surviving isn't pathetic. Surviving is the hardest thing there is." Sophie wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because somebody should have told Emma. Somebody should have sat with her and told her she mattered, that she was strong, that she wasn't alone." Ray's voice was thick with emotion. "I can't save my daughter, but maybe I can help you." "I don't need saving," Sophie said, but it sounded like a question. "No," Ray agreed. "You don't need saving. You need someone standing with you. There's a difference." He stood up, his knees protesting, and looked down at her. "My crew and I are inside. We'd be honored if you'd join us for some pie, or another milkshake if you want." Sophie stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "Why would you want me to?" "Because everybody deserves to sit at a table where they're wanted. And because those boys need to know they can't do what they did without consequences." He extended his hand, not to pull her up, just an offer. Sophie looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly she took it. His grip was warm and steady. "Come on," Ray said. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." They walked into Miller's diner together, Ray moving slow to match Sophie's pace. The bell jingled, heads turned, and this time when people looked at Sophie, they didn't look away, because she wasn't alone anymore. She had a 64-year-old biker with kind eyes and a protective stance walking in beside her, and that changed everything. Ray led Sophie to the booth where his crew sat, four large men in leather jackets, all of whom looked up as they approached. Their expressions shifted immediately, understanding, passing between them without words. "Brothers," Ray said, "this is Sophie. She's going to sit with us." Bear was the first to react. He scooted over, immediately making room. "Hey there, Sophie. I'm Bear. Pleasure to meet you." Marcus gave her a gentle nod. "Marcus." Tommy and Jesse introduced themselves, their voices softer than their appearance suggested. Sophie stood there, frozen, her crutches suddenly feeling like they weighed 1,000 pounds. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had invited her to sit with them. Couldn't remember the last time she'd felt welcome. "Go on," Ray said gently. "Sit. You're among friends." Sophie lowered herself into the booth, Bear on one side, Ray on the other. The men arranged themselves, naturally creating a protective wall around her without making it obvious. Rita appeared, her eyes wide, taking in the scene. "Can I get you folks anything?" Ray looked at Sophie. What do you want, kiddo? Sophie's voice was small. I had a milkshake, but it... She trailed off, looking at the broken glass still visible in the corner. But some punk knocked it over. Bear finished for her, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. Well, that ain't right. Rita, can we get this young lady the biggest chocolate milkshake you've got? The kind with extra whipping cream and 2 cherries. Rita's face broke into a real smile for the first time that morning. You got it. As Rita walked away, Sophie sat rigid, her hands clasped in her lap. She didn't know what to do with this. Didn't know how to process kindness from strangers. Ray leaned back, his arms stretched across the back of the booth, casual and non-threatening. So, Sophie, tell me about yourself. What do you like to do? I draw. The words came out hesitant. Yeah, what do you draw? Sophie pulled her sketchbook from her backpack, handling it like it was made of glass. She opened it slowly, showing him the pages filled with hands. Hands in every position imaginable. Hands reaching, resting, holding, grasping. Ray studied the drawings with genuine interest. These are good, real good. You got talent. They're just hands, Sophie said. Nothing wrong with hand, Marcus chimed in. Hands tell stories. Hands do the work. I'd rather look at someone's hands than their face any day. Sophie looked up surprised. Bear leaned over to look at the sketchbook. Damn, girl, you're an artist. You thinking about art school? Sophie's expression shuddered. Can't afford it. Can't afford it yet, Ray corrected. That's different than never. The milkshake arrived tall and perfect, and Sophie stared at it like it might disappear. Go on, Ray encouraged. It's yours. Sophie took a sip, and for just a moment, her face relaxed. The simple pleasure of something cold and sweet, something normal, something that felt like being a kid again. The men started talking easy and comfortable, pulling Sophie into the conversation without putting pressure on her. They talked about their ride, about the kids they were going to visit in Bozeman, about Bear's terrible jokes and Marcus's worst cooking. And slowly, incrementally, Sophie began to thaw. She wasn't smiling yet, but the rigidity in her shoulders eased. The fear in her eyes dimmed slightly. Ray watched her, seeing Emma in every small gesture, but he pushed that pain down. This wasn't about his guilt. This was about this girl right now in this moment. After a while, Ray leaned forward, his voice low and serious. Sophie, I need to ask you something. Those boys who hurt you, they local? Sophie's hand froze on her milkshake. She nodded. They do this kind of thing a lot. Another nod, smaller this time. Anybody ever stop them? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. No, nobody stops them. His dad's the sheriff. Ray's expression darkened. The pieces clicked into place. Sheriff's son, untouchable, protected by power and fear. What's his name? Ray asked. Sophie hesitated. Then so quietly they almost didn't hear Tyler Brennan. The name hit Ray like a physical blow. Brennan. He sat back, his mind racing. Brennan. It couldn't be the same Brennan, could it? But he knew it was. Small towns didn't change. Bullies raised bullies, and Derek Brennan had been the worst of them all. 46 years ago, Ray had been a skinny kid in Millers Creek High School. Smart, quiet, keeping his head down. And Derek Brennan, quarterback, golden boy, son of the police chief, had made Ray's life a living hell. 4 years of torment, locker shoves, books knocked out of his hands, rumors spread, humiliation at every turn, and nobody stopped it. Because Derek's father ran the town, and what was Ray going to do about it? Nothing. That's what he'd done. He'd taken it. And the day after graduation, he'd joined the Marines and left Millers Creek in his rearview mirror. He'd come back eventually, 25 years later. Different man with different scars. Derek was sheriff by then. They'd seen each other exactly once at a town meeting. Derek had smirked. Ray had walked away. And now Derek's son was doing to Sophie what Derek had done to him. History repeating itself, generational cruelty. Ray realized he'd been silent too long. The others were looking at him. You know the name? Marcus asked quietly. Yeah, Ray said. I know it. He didn't elaborate. Not yet. Not in front of Sophie. Instead, he turned to her, his expression gentle, but his eyes hard with determination. Sophie, listen to me. What happened to you today, that wasn't right. And it doesn't matter who his daddy is. Nobody gets to put their hands on you like that. But nobody cares, Sophie said. and the defeat in her voice broke Ray's heart. Nobody ever cares. I care, Ray said firmly. We all care. He gestured to his crew and they all nodded. And before we leave this town, those boys are going to apologize to you. A real apology, looking you in the eye. Sophie shook her head. They'll never. Yes, they will, Bear rumbled. Trust me on that. The door to the diner opened, and Sophie's whole body went rigid. Ray looked up. Two teenage boys walked in, tall, cocky, laughing about something. One of them was broad-shouldered with messy brown hair. The other was thinner, always a step behind. Sophie made a small sound, almost a whimper, and tried to sink into the booth. That them? Ray asked quietly. Sophie nodded, unable to speak. Tyler Brennan and Cole Hendricks hadn't noticed the bikers yet. They were too busy replaying their morning triumph, laughing about the look on Sophie's face, the sound of the glass breaking. They walked toward the counter, still oblivious. And then Tyler glanced toward the back booth. His laughter died in his throat. Sophie was sitting there, but she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by 5 large men in leather jackets, all of whom were now looking directly at him. The diner went silent again. That same awful silence from earlier, but with a different energy now. Not the silence of cowardice, the silence of anticipation. Ray didn't stand immediately. He just sat there, staring at Tyler, his expression utterly calm. But there was something in his eyes, something cold and hard and absolutely unyielding. Tyler's face went from cocky to uncertain in the span of 3 seconds. Cole took a step back, his survival instincts better than his friends. Ray stood slowly. The movement was casual, unhurried, but it felt like a mountain rising. He was 6 feet tall, broad across the shoulders, and even at 64, he moved with the controlled power of someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. He didn't approach aggressively. He just walked toward Tyler with measured, deliberate steps. Tyler's bravado flickered. He tried to hold his ground, puffing out his chest, but his eyes betrayed him. There was fear there now. Ray stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be intimidating, not close enough to be threatening. You, Tyler Brennan? Tyler's voice cracked slightly. Who's asking? I'm asking. Ray's voice was quiet but carried through the silent diner. And I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you Tyler Brennan? Yeah, so what? So I understand you put your hands on that girl over there. Ray jerked his head toward Sophie. That true? Tyler glanced at Cole, looking for backup. Cole had somehow managed to back all the way to the door. We were just messing around, Tyler said, trying to sound tough. It wasn't that big a deal. Not that big a deal, Ray repeated slowly. He took 1 step closer. Let me explain something to you, son. Messing around is dropping a napkin. Messing around is telling a bad joke. What you did, that wasn't messing around. That was assault. On a disabled girl. In front of witnesses. Tyler's jaw clenched. My dad's the sheriff. You don't want to. I don't give a damn if your daddy's the president. Ray cut him off, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You hit her. You knocked her drink on the floor. You humiliated her. And then you walked out laughing. The diner was so quiet you could hear the coffee maker hissing in the background. Ray's crew had moved subtle but deliberate, creating a wall between Tyler and the exit. Not threatening, just present. Just making it clear that Tyler wasn't leaving until this was resolved. I'm going to give you 2 choices, Ray continued. Choice 1. You walk over to that booth, look that girl in the eye, and you apologize. A real apology, not some half-assed mumble. You tell her you're sorry for what you did, and you mean it. Tyler's face was red now. And if I don't, Ray's smile was cold. Choice 2, I call the state police, show them the security footage from this diner, file assault charges, and make sure every newspaper in Montana knows that Sheriff Brennan's son likes to beat up disabled teenage girls. Tyler's eyes widened. He looked around the diner, suddenly realizing that everyone was watching. Everyone would remember. You can't. I absolutely can, Ray said. So what's it going to be, son? You going to do the right thing? Or are you going to find out what happens when someone finally stands up to you? For a long moment, Tyler just stood there, his face a mixture of anger and fear and something that might have been shame. Finally, he moved, not toward the door, toward Sophie's booth. Cole followed, pale and silent. Ray stayed close, a silent presence ensuring they followed through. Tyler stopped at the booth. Sophie was staring at the table, her whole body trembling. Sophie. She flinched at her name. Tyler's voice was tight. I'm, I'm sorry. Ray's hand landed on Tyler's shoulder. Not rough, but firm. Look at her. Tyler lifted his eyes, met Sophie's gaze. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time there was something almost real in his voice. What I did was wrong. I shouldn't have hit you. I shouldn't have. He trailed off, swallowing hard. Sophie stared at him, her eyes red, her face bruised. She didn't speak. What could she say? The apology didn't undo the hurt, didn't erase the humiliation. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was Tyler Brennan, who had never faced consequences in his life, being forced to face this one. Ray looked at Cole. You too. Cole practically stumbled forward. I'm sorry, Sophie, really sorry. It won't happen again. Ray kept his hand on Tyler's shoulder, his voice dropping low so only Tyler could hear. You listen to me very carefully. I don't care who your father is. You ever, and I mean ever, put your hands on this girl again, or on any girl, you'll answer to me. And trust me, son, you don't want that. Tyler's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. He nodded. Now get out of here, Ray said, releasing him, and you think real hard about the kind of man you want to be. Tyler and Cole practically ran for the door. The bell jingled as they burst out into the November cold, and then they were gone. The diner erupted, not with applause, but with a collective exhale. People started talking again, the tension breaking like a snapped wire. Rita had tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Ray turned back to the booth where Sophie sat, still trembling, still processing what had just happened. He slid back into his seat beside her. You okay? Sophie looked at him with something like awe. You made them apologize. I did. Nobody's ever, her voice broke. Nobody's ever stood up for me before. Ray's expression softened. Well, somebody did today, and I'm going to give you something important, Sophie. He pulled a card from his wallet. It was simple, just a phone number and a name, Raymond Thorne, Iron Brotherhood MC. You keep this, he said, pressing it into her hand. You ever need help, you ever feel scared, you call me. Day or night, doesn't matter, I will come. You understand? Sophie clutched the card like it was a lifeline. Why are you doing this? Because somebody should have done it for my daughter, Ray said simply. And because you deserve to know that not everyone in this world is cruel. Some of us still believe in standing up for what's right. He paused, then added, his voice intense and sincere. And Sophie, I need you to hear this. What happened to you today, what's been happening to you, it's not because you're weak. It's not because you're broken. It's because they are. Sophie's eyes filled with tears again, but different tears this time. You're stronger than you know, Ray continued. You've survived things that would have broken most people. You get up every day and face a world that's been nothing but unkind. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's courage. Don't you ever forget that. Bear reached across the table and gently squeezed Sophie's hand. He's right. You're a warrior kid. Sophie let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. She wiped at her eyes with her sleeve. They sat there for another hour. The men told stories made Sophie laugh despite everything. She learned that Bear could juggle and Marcus had once been in a terrible country music band. She learned that Tommy was afraid of spiders and Jesse collected vintage comic books. They made her feel normal. They made her feel seen. When it was finally time for them to leave, Ray stood and helped Sophie gather her things. We've got to get back on the road, he said. But you remember what I told you. You're not alone, not anymore. Sophie nodded, still holding his card. Thank you, all of you. The crew filed out, each of them giving Sophie a gentle word or touch on the shoulder as they passed. Ray was the last to leave. He paused at the door, looking back at her. One more thing, Sophie. Don't ever let people like that decide your worth. You're worth more than 1,000 Tyler Brennans. You remember that? And then he was gone, the bell jingling behind him. Sophie stood in the diner listening to the rumble of motorcycle engines starting up. She moved to the window and watched as the Iron Brotherhood pulled out of the parking lot, disappearing down the highway. Rita came up beside her, wiping her eyes. Those are good men. Yeah, Sophie whispered. They are. That evening, Sophie sat in her small bedroom, Ray's card on her desk. Her face still ached from the slap, but something inside her had shifted. She pulled out her laptop and typed Tyler Brennan into the search bar. The results came up immediately. Tyler Brennan, star athlete at Millers Creek High. Multiple photos at school events, parties posing with friends, and in several photos prominently displayed his father. Sheriff Derek Brennan. Sophie's stomach dropped. She clicked through more images, landing on an official county website. Sheriff Derek Brennan, elected 2008, re-elected every 4 years since. She kept digging, falling down a rabbit hole of information. She found old newspaper articles about her own hit and run, the investigation that went nowhere, the case that closed with insufficient evidence, and the lead investigator's name at the bottom of every report, Sheriff Derek Brennan. Sophie's hands began to shake. She pulled up Tyler's Facebook page, scrolling back through years of posts. And there, in photos from 6 years ago, right around the time of her accident, were pictures of Tyler as a skinny 11-year-old standing beside a large pickup truck. The same kind of truck that had hit her. Sophie's breath came faster. It couldn't be. It was too big a coincidence. But deep in her gut, she knew. She'd always known, hadn't she? She'd just been too afraid to voice it. Tyler Brennan had hit her 6 years ago, and his father had covered it up. Sophie stared at the screen, her mind racing. She had no proof, just a suspicion, just a feeling, but it was there, solid and undeniable. She looked at Ray's card again. She'd promised herself she wouldn't drag him into her problems. He'd already done so much. He was just passing through town. He had his own life, his own pain. But the cards sat there, and Sophie's hand hovered over her phone. Before she could talk herself out of it, she picked up her phone and dialed. It rang 3 times, then Ray's gravelly voice answered. "This is Ray." Sophie's voice came out small and scared. "Mr. Thorne, it's Sophie. Sophie Delacroix." "Sophie." His tone immediately shifted, concerned. "You okay? Did something happen?" "I'm okay, I need to tell you something. About Tyler. About his father." "I'm listening." Sophie took a deep breath. "Sheriff Brennan investigated my hit and run 6 years ago. The case went nowhere. And I think Tyler did it. I think Tyler was the one who hit me, and I think his father covered it up." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Ray's voice came back, low and dangerous. "Tell me everything." And Sophie did. She told him about the timing, about the truck, about the investigation that seemed designed to fail. She told him about the suspicion she'd carried for years, but never voiced because who would believe her? Ray listened to every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Sophie, I need you to do something for me. I need you to write down everything you just told me. Dates, details, anything you remember. And then I need you to keep that information somewhere safe." "Why, mine? Because we're going to need it," Ray said. "But I need you to promise me something. Don't confront Tyler. Don't do anything that might put you in danger. Let me handle this." "But he's the sheriff's son, and you said you knew his father. What if—" "I did know his father," Ray interrupted. "Derek Brennan made my life hell when I was your age. And now his son is doing the same thing to you. That ends now." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "Mr. Thorne, I'm scared." "I know you are, and that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart enough to know when you're facing something bigger than yourself." He paused, then added with absolute certainty, "But here's the thing, Sophie. You're not facing it alone anymore. Not now, not ever. You understand me?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Yes." "Good. Now you get some rest, and tomorrow you write everything down. We're going to fix this, I promise you." They said their goodbyes, and Sophie hung up. She sat in her dark room, holding the phone, feeling something she hadn't felt in 6 years. Hope. Meanwhile, 50 miles down the highway, Ray sat in a motel room in Bozeman. His crew had gone to bed, preparing for tomorrow's charity ride. But Ray couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, his phone still in his hand, staring at nothing. Derek Brennan. The name brought back a flood of memories. Locker slams, laughter, humiliation. The feeling of being utterly powerless in the face of someone who had all the authority, all the protection, all the control. Ray had run from Derek 46 years ago, joined the Marines, built a new life, came back a different man. But he'd never confronted him, never stood up to him. He'd let it go, told himself it was ancient history, that revenge was pointless. But now Derek's son was doing the same thing to Sophie. And unlike Ray at 17, Sophie had nowhere to run. Ray pulled out his wallet and extracted an old worn photograph. Emma, 13 years old, smiling at the camera, before everything went dark. He'd failed Emma. He'd told her to be tough, to not let the bullies win. And she'd taken his words to mean that her pain didn't matter, that she should handle it alone. And it had killed her. Ray had carried that guilt for 23 years. Every day he woke up and it was there. The weight of knowing he could have saved his daughter if he'd just listened. He couldn't save Emma, but he could save Sophie. Ray made a decision. Tomorrow after the charity ride, he was going back to Miller's Creek. He was going to investigate Sophie's story. He was going to find proof. And if Derek Brennan had covered up his son's crime, if he'd let Sophie live for 6 years, not knowing who had taken her leg, if he'd protected Tyler at the cost of justice, then Ray was going to make sure everyone knew. He didn't care if Derek was the sheriff. He didn't care if it brought up old history. He didn't care if it put him in danger. Some things were worth fighting for. Ray looked at Emma's picture one more time. I couldn't save you, baby girl, but I'm going to save this one. I promise. He lay down, but sleep didn't come. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something. A reckoning. A confrontation 46 years in the making. And this time Ray wasn't running. This time he was standing his ground. For Sophie. For Emma. For every kid who'd ever been made to feel small and powerless by someone who thought might made right. The war was coming to Miller's Creek, and Raymond Thorne was leading the charge. The charity ride in Bozeman was supposed to be simple. Show up, hand out teddy bears, make sick kids smile, ride home. Ray had done dozens of them over the years. They were good for the soul, reminders that the world still had innocence worth protecting. But this time Ray's mind was elsewhere. He went through the motions, smiled for the cameras, let a 5-year-old with leukemia touch his motorcycle, handed out stuffed animals to children who'd seen more hospitals than playgrounds. But his thoughts kept circling back to Miller's Creek, to Sophie, to the suspicion that had taken root in his gut and wouldn't let go. Bear noticed. He always noticed. You planning to tell us what's eating at you? Bear asked as they packed up to leave. Or we just going to pretend you're not somewhere else right now? Ray glanced at Marcus, Tommy, and Jesse, his crew, his brothers. They deserved to know. That girl from the diner, Sophie, she called me last night. The men stopped what they were doing. She thinks Tyler Brennan was the one who hit her 6 years ago, the accident that took her leg, and she thinks the sheriff covered it up. Marcus let out a low whistle. That's a hell of an accusation. It is fine, Ray agreed, but the timeline fits. Tyler would have been 11. The investigation went nowhere, and Derek Brennan was the lead investigator. Derek Brennan, Bear repeated slowly. That name keep coming up, and you keep getting this look on your face. You gonna tell us why? Ray leaned against his bike, arms crossed. Derek Brennan made my life hell in high school. 4 years of constant harassment. He was the sheriff's son back then too, before he became sheriff himself. Nobody stopped him. Nobody could touch him. And now his kid's doing the same thing, Tommy said quietly. Generational bullying, Marcus added. Like father, like son. Ray nodded. I left town to get away from him. Joined the Marines at 18, never looked back. Came home 25 years later, and he's still here. Still running things. Still protecting his own. So what do you want to do? Jesse asked. Ray met their eyes one by one. I want to go back to Miller's Creek. I want to investigate Sophie's claim. And if there's truth to it, I want to expose it. That's going to make you some powerful enemies, Marcus said. Sheriff's a connected man. He can make our lives very difficult. I know. Could mean arrests on trumped-up charges, harassment, business troubles. I know that too. Bear stepped forward. Then I guess we better get started. Ray shook his head. This isn't your fight. This is between me and Derek Brennan. Has been for 46 years. Brother, Bear said, his voice rumbling with affection and certainty. We're the Iron Brotherhood. We don't leave each other to fight alone. You're going back to Miller's Creek, then we all are. Marcus nodded. I'm in. Tommy and Jesse echoed the sentiment. Ray felt his throat tighten. You all got families, businesses. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, Bear interrupted. We're volunteering. That girl needs help, and you need backup. End of discussion. Ray looked at them, these men who'd become his family after Emma died, after his wife Sarah passed from cancer, after he'd found himself alone and drowning in grief. They'd pulled him back from the edge, given him purpose. All right, Ray said. Then we do this smart, we do this legal, and we do this right. They rode back to Miller's Creek that afternoon. Sophie spent the day doing what Ray had asked, writing everything down, the accident, the investigation, the strange inconsistencies she'd noticed over the years but never voiced. She wrote about the truck she'd seen in Tyler's old photos, the timeline that matched perfectly, the way Sheriff Brennan had closed the case so quickly without following obvious leads. She wrote about the physical therapy bills that had bankrupted her family, about her father leaving because he couldn't handle a broken kid, about the 6 years of isolation and pain and wondering why. Her mother, Grace, came home from her shift at 4 in the afternoon, exhausted as always. She found Sophie at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and printouts. Honey, what's all this? Sophie looked up. She'd been crying and her eyes red and swollen. Mom, I need to tell you something. Grace sat down slowly, that fear look crossing her face. The look she'd worn for 6 years, always waiting for the next disaster. I think I know who hit me, Sophie said. I think it was Tyler Brennan. And I think his father covered it up. Grace went very still. Sophie, I know how it sounds, but Mom, look at these. Sophie spread out the papers, the timeline, the photos, the inconsistencies in the police report. Grace studied them, her hands beginning to shake. Even if this is true, Sophie, we can't. The sheriff is... I know what he is, Sophie said, but I met someone, a man named Ray Thorne. He was at the diner yesterday when Tyler hit me. He made Tyler apologize. And when I called him last night and told him about my suspicions, he believed me. A stranger believed you. Grace's voice was skeptical, protective. Honey, I don't think... He's not a stranger. Not anymore. Sophie pulled out Ray's card. He lost his daughter to bullying 23 years ago. He couldn't save her. And I think helping me is how he makes peace with that. Grace picked up the card, staring at it. A biker. A good man, Sophie corrected. The first person in 6 years to stand up for me. Grace's face crumpled. I should have stood up for you. All those times at school, all those complaints I filed that went nowhere. I should have fought harder. You were fighting just to keep us alive, Sophie said gently. You were working doubles to pay medical bills. You couldn't take on the sheriff too. But this man can... I don't know, Sophie admitted, but he's willing to try. And Mom, I need to know the truth. I need to know if the person who took my leg has been walking around free all this time. If the man who investigated my case deliberately buried it to protect his son. Grace was quiet for a long time. Then she said, if we do this, if we go after the sheriff, you could lose everything. I could lose my job. The hospital administrator is his brother-in-law. I know. We could be forced to leave town. I know. Sophie, are you sure? Is this worth it? Sophie looked at her mother, this exhausted woman who'd sacrificed everything, who'd stayed when her husband left, who'd worked herself to the bone to give Sophie some kind of flip. I've been living in fear for 6 years, Sophie said quietly. Afraid to go outside, afraid to go to school, afraid to exist. And Tyler Brennan gets to walk around like he's untouchable, like he didn't destroy my life when he was 11 years old, like his father didn't help him get away with it. She paused, then added with surprising strength, I'm tired of being afraid, Mom. I'm tired of being the victim. Even if we lose everything, at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have stood up. Grace reached across the table and took Sophie's hand. Then we stand up together. Mother and daughter sat there in the fading afternoon light, holding hands, making a decision that would change everything. Ray and his crew pulled into Miller's Creek just as the sun was setting. The town looked different in the dying light, smaller, more vulnerable. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, which meant secrets were both easy to keep and impossible to hide once exposed. They went straight to Ray's place, a small house on the edge of town. Ray had bought it 10 years ago when he'd finally decided to settle down after decades of drifting. It wasn't much, but it was his. The crew gathered in the living room. Marcus immediately pulled out his laptop. All right, Marcus said, cracking his knuckles. Let's see what we can find. Marcus Callahan hadn't always been a biker. He'd been an IT specialist for a major corporate corporation before his divorce 3 years ago. Lost his job in the settlement, lost custody of his daughter to a vindictive ex-wife. The Iron Brotherhood had given him purpose when he'd had none, and his computer skills had proven invaluable more than once. Marcus navigated to the county records database. Police reports are public record in Montana. Let's start there. He pulled up the incident report from Sophie's hit and run. 6 years ago, November 12th, Sophie Delacroix, age 10, struck by unknown vehicle while riding bicycle on County Road 7. Transported to county hospital. Left leg amputated below knee due to severe trauma. Investigation led by Sheriff Derek Brennan. Case status closed due to insufficient evidence. Look at this, Marcus said, pointing at the screen. Investigation lasted exactly 2 weeks. 2 weeks for a hit and run that maimed a child. Ray leaned in closer. What's normal for this kind of case? Months, Marcus said, especially involving a child. They should have canvassed for witnesses, checked every vehicle in the county for damage, analyzed paint transfer tire marks. But look at the evidence list. He scrolled down. The list was shockingly short. No paint samples, no tire impressions, no vehicle inspections conducted. It's like they didn't even try, Bear said, reading over Marcus's shoulder. Or they tried not to find anything, Tommy added darkly. Marcus kept digging. Traffic camera footage from that night. He accessed the county's traffic management system, searching for archived footage. Camera on County Road 7 was supposedly malfunctioning that night, Marcus said. Convenient. Can you get the footage anyway? Ray asked. Oh, if it was archived before being deleted, maybe, but it'll take time. Marcus made notes. What else do we know? Ray pulled out his phone, reading from the notes Sophie had sent him. Tyler Brennan was 11 at the time. He'd been caught joyriding twice before that year, but the charges were dropped both times. Let me guess, Jesse said. Daddy made them disappear. Probably. Ray continued reading. Sophie remembers the truck that hit her was big, dark-colored, damaged front left side after the impact. Marcus typed rapidly. Brennan family vehicle registrations from 2018. He pulled up the records. Derek Brennan owned 2 vehicles in that year, a sedan and a Ford F-250 pickup, dark blue. The room went quiet. That's not proof, Marcus said carefully. Lots of people own Ford pickups. But it's a data point, Ray said. Keep going. Marcus worked for another hour, pulling up everything he could find. Tyler's juvenile record, mostly sealed, but with hints of prior incidents. Derek Brennan's career history, 30 years in law enforcement, always protected, always promoted. The Brennan family's standing in the community. Finally, Marcus sat back. Here's what we've got. We've got circumstantial evidence suggesting Tyler could have been involved. We've got an investigation that looks deliberately incomplete. We've got a sheriff with a history of protecting his son, but we don't have proof. So what do we need, Ray asked. Physical evidence, Marcus said. The truck, dash cam footage, witnesses, something concrete that ties Tyler to the scene. The truck from 6 years ago is probably long gone, Bear pointed out. Maybe, Marcus said. Or maybe it's still around. Rich families don't always trade in vehicles. Sometimes they keep them, pass them down. Ray stood up, pacing. We need to be smart about this. If Derek catches wind of what we're doing, he'll shut us down, make evidence disappear, arrest us on bogus charges. So we move quietly, Marcus said. I'll keep digging online, see if I can find that traffic camera footage, check if the truck was ever repaired at a local body shop. Tommy and Jesse, you two ask around town, casual-like. See if anyone remembers anything from that night. What about me? Bear asked. Ray looked at him. You and I are going to have a conversation with Rita at the diner. She's been in this town forever. If there's gossip, she's heard it. And what about Sophie? Marcus asked. Ray's expression hardened. Sophie stays safe. She doesn't confront anyone. She doesn't ask questions. She's done enough by giving us a starting point. From here, we handle it. The next morning, Sophie went to school. She'd been homeschooling for 2 years, only coming in twice a week for mandatory lab work. But today was one of those days. Chemistry lab. Unavoidable. She almost called in sick. The bruise on her face from Tyler's slap was now a deep purple. Everyone would see, everyone would stare. But then she remembered Ray's words. You're stronger than you know. So she went. Millers Creek High School was exactly as she remembered. Lockers slamming, students laughing, the smell of cheap cologne and cafeteria food, the feeling of being completely, utterly alone in a crowd. Sophie kept her head down, moving through the hallways on her crutches. She felt every stare, every whisper. But she kept moving. Chemistry lab was on the second floor. The elevator was broken as it had been for 3 years. Sophie took the stairs slowly, one at a time, her arms aching by the time she reached the top. She was 5 minutes early. The lab was empty. Sophie chose a station in the back, arranging her materials, trying to be invisible. Other students filtered in. They saw her, saw the bruise. Some looked away quickly. Others stared openly. And then Tyler walked in. Sophie's whole body went rigid. Tyler saw her immediately. Their eyes met across the room. For just a second, something flickered in his expression. Shame, regret. But then his usual mask fell back into place. He didn't approach, didn't say anything, just took his seat on the opposite side of the room. The teacher, Mr. Hendricks, began the lesson. Sophie tried to focus on the periodic table, on balancing equations, on anything but the feeling of Tyler's presence in the room. Halfway through class, Mr. Hendricks assigned partner work. Tyler, you'll work with Sophie today. She needs to catch up on the labs she's missed. Sophie's stomach dropped. Tyler's face went pale. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, Tyler gathered his materials and crossed the room. He sat down at Sophie's station without making eye contact. The silence between them was thick and suffocating. They worked without speaking for 10 minutes. Tyler handled the beakers. Sophie recorded the data. They moved around each other like ghosts. Finally, Tyler spoke, his voice low enough that only Sophie could hear. I really am sorry about yesterday. Sophie's pencil froze on her paper. She didn't look at him. The guy with the bikers, Tyler continued, he scared the hell out of me. But he was right. What I did was wrong. Sophie finally raised her eyes, looked at him. Really looked at him. Tyler looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like misery. Why do you do it? Sophie asked quietly. Why do you hate me so much? Tyler flinched. I don't hate you. You hit me, you mock me. You made a video of me falling and posted it online. I know. Tyler's hands clenched on the edge of the table. I know, and I don't have a good reason. I do it because I can. Because nobody stops me. Because it's easier to hurt you than to deal with my own shit. Sophie stared at him. This was the most honest Tyler had ever been. What shit? She asked. Tyler laughed, but it was bitter. Doesn't matter. It matters if you're using it as an excuse to torture me. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then so softly, Sophie almost didn't hear. Every time I see you, I remember what I did. Sophie's breath caught. What you did? Tyler's face went white. He'd said too much. Nothing. Forget it. But Sophie's mind was racing. Every time I see you, I remember what I did. Not what happened to you. What I did. Sophie's voice shook. Tyler, were you the one who hit me? Tyler shot to his feet so fast his stool fell over with a loud crash. The entire class turned to look. I need to use the bathroom, Tyler announced to Mr. Hendricks, and then he was gone, practically running from the room. Sophie sat frozen, her heart pounding. He'd basically confessed. Not in words, but in his reaction. In the guilt written all over his face. Sophie pulled out her phone under the table and texted Ray. He admitted it. Not directly, but he admitted it. The response came back within seconds. Don't confront him again. I'm handling it. But Sophie couldn't stop shaking. For 6 years, she'd wondered who had hit her and driven away. And now she knew. It was Tyler Brennan. The same boy who'd been tormenting her. The same boy whose father had investigated the case and buried it. The bell rang. Sophie gathered her things and left as quickly as she could. She was halfway down the hall when she heard Tyler's voice behind her own. Sophie, wait. She turned. Tyler was there looking panicked and desperate. Please don't tell anyone what I said, Tyler begged. Please, my dad will... Your dad will what? Sophie asked, her voice harder than she'd ever heard it. Protect you, like he's been protecting you for 6 years. Tyler's face crumpled. You don't understand. I was 11. I was stupid. I took his truck for a joyride and I didn't see you until it was too late and I panicked and I drove away and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but if anyone finds out, you'll finally face consequences. Sophie finished. You'll finally be held accountable for what you did to me. I was a kid, Tyler said desperately. So was I, Sophie shot back. But I lost my leg. I lost my father. I lost 6 years of my life to fear and pain. And you got to walk away like nothing happened. Tyler was crying now, tears streaming down his face. What do you want from me? Sophie looked at him, this boy who'd taken so much from her, and realized something profound. She didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. She wanted truth. I want you to tell the truth, Sophie said. I want you to admit what you did, not just to me, to everyone. I can't, Taylor whispered. My dad will kill me. Then you're a coward, Sophie said. You've been a coward for 6 years. She turned and walked away, leaving Tyler standing in the hallway sobbing. Sophie made it outside before her own tears came. She sat on the bench near the parking lot, the same kind of bench she'd sat on at the diner, and cried. But these tears were different. These weren't tears of defeat. These were tears of rage and validation and power. She'd been right. She'd known. And now Tyler had confirmed it. Her phone buzzed. Ray? Where are you, Sophie School? Parking lot, Ray. Stay there, I'm coming. 15 minutes later, Ray's motorcycle pulled into the parking lot. He dismounted, crossed to Sophie, and sat beside her without a word. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sophie said, He admitted it. Tyler admitted he hit me. Ray's jaw clenched. Did anyone else hear? No, we were in the hall. But Ray, he confessed. He said he took his father's truck, that he didn't see me until it was too late, that he panicked and drove away. That's not going to hold up in court, Ray said gently. We need more than a private confession. I know, Sophie wiped her eyes, but at least I know I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. Ray put his hand on her shoulder, solid and reassuring. You were never crazy. You were always right. They sat there together watching students file out of the school, getting into cars and buses, heading home to their normal, uncomplicated lives. What happens now? Sophie asked. Now we get proof, Ray said. Marcus is working on finding the traffic camera footage. I'm going to talk to some people, see if anyone remembers seeing the truck that night, and Bear's checking body shops to see if the Brennan truck was ever brought in for repairs. And if you find proof, then we go to the state police. We bypass Derek entirely, and we make sure everyone knows what he did. Sophie nodded slowly. His father's going to come after us. After you. Let him, Ray said, his voice cold. I've been avoiding Derek Brennan for 46 years. I'm done running. That night, things escalated. Sophie and Grace were home eating a quiet dinner of leftover pasta when they heard a loud crash from the living room. Both women jumped. Grace screamed. A brick lay in the middle of the living room floor, surrounded by shattered glass from the window. Attached to the brick was a note written in crude block letters. Last warning, leave it alone. Sophie's hands started shaking. Grace ran to the window, looking out into the dark street, but saw nothing. No car, no person, just darkness. Grace pulled out her phone with the trembling fingers and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone threw a brick through our window. There's a threatening note attached. Address, Grace gave it. Units are on the way. Are you and your daughter safe? I don't know. I don't know if they're still out there. Stay inside. Lock your doors. Officers will be there in 5 minutes. Grace hung up and pulled Sophie away from the window. They huddled together in the kitchen, lights off, waiting. The sheriff's deputies arrived 12 minutes later. Not 5. 12. Deputy Marsh and Deputy Collins. Both in their 30s, both with the swagger of men who knew they were untouchable. They looked at the broken window, the brick, the note. Deputy Marsh picked up the note with barely concealed amusement. Last warning, he read aloud. Warning about what? I don't know, Grace said, her voice shaking. Maybe it's related to what happened at the diner yesterday. Some boys attacked my daughter. Deputy Collins glanced at Sophie, his eyes lingering on the bruise. Attacked? Tyler Brennan slapped her, Grace said. Multiple witnesses. The deputies exchanged a look. Mrs. Delacroix, Deputy Marsh said slowly, Tyler Brennan is a good kid. Are you sure your daughter didn't provoke? She was sitting in a booth drinking a milkshake. Grace interrupted, her voice rising. What exactly could she have done to provoke being slapped across the face? Deputy Collins shrugged. Kids these days, they exaggerate, make things up for attention. Sophie felt rage building in her chest. I'm not making it up. Rita saw. Everyone in the diner saw. Well, we'll look into it, Deputy Marsh said, but his tone suggested he absolutely would not look into it. As for this, he gestured at the brick, probably just kids, pranks. You know how it is? This isn't a prank, Grace said. This is a threat. We'll file a report, Deputy Collins said dismissively. But between you and me, you might want to consider not making waves. Small town like this, people don't like troublemakers. The implication was clear. This was a warning from the sheriff's office itself. After the deputies left doing absolutely nothing to help, Grace called Ray. He answered on the first ring. Grace, someone threw a brick through our window. There was a note, a threat. Ray's voice went cold. Are you two safe? For now, but Ray, the deputies didn't help. They blamed Sophie. They basically told us to shut up and stop causing trouble. Pack a bag, Ray said immediately. Both of you, you're not staying there tonight. Where? My place. I've got a guest room. You'll be safe here. Grace hesitated. Taking her daughter to stay with a biker she'd only known for 2 days seemed insane. But staying in a house with a broken window and no protection seemed more insane. Okay, Grace said. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Sophie and Grace packed quickly, closed toiletries, Sophie's medications. Grace grabbed important documents just in case. They left the house with its broken window and threatening note, got into Grace's beat-up Honda, and drove across town. Ray was waiting on his porch when they arrived. Bear was with him, standing like a mountain of protective intent. Come on in, Ray said gently. You're safe here. Inside the house was small but clean, lived in. Photos on the walls, mostly of motorcycles and landscapes. One photo of a young girl smiling that must have been Emma. Ray showed them to the guest room. Bathrooms across the hall. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourselves to anything. Thank you, Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Ray said simply. Marcus, Tommy, and Jesse arrived an hour later. The entire Aaron Brotherhood crew gathered in Ray's living room, forming a protective circle around Sophie and Grace. This is escalating faster than I expected, Marcus said. Throwing bricks means Derek knows we're investigating, means he's scared. Good, Ray said. Scared people make mistakes. But they also get dangerous, Marcus countered. We need to move fast, get evidence before he can bury it deeper. Did you find anything, Ray asked. Marcus pulled out his laptop. Maybe. I've been digging through archived traffic camera footage. The camera on County Road 7 supposedly malfunctioned the night of Sophie's accident, but there's a backup server that auto-archives footage before it's deleted locally. He turned the laptop around, showing grainy black and white footage. This is from the camera a mile west of the accident site. Timestamp shows 8:47 p.m., which is about 10 minutes before Sophie was hit. They watched. Cars passed, a few trucks, and then clear as day, a large Ford pickup, dark color, drove past. The license plate was partially visible. Marcus zoomed in, enhanced the image. That's a Montana plate. First 3 characters are clear, 4B7. That's a Cascade County registration. Can you trace it? Ray asked. Already did. Marcus pulled up the DMV records. License plate 4B7829, registered to Derek Brennan. 2015 Ford F-250, dark blue. The room went silent. That's not proof he hit her, Bear said, carefully. Just proof the truck was in the area. But it's a start, Marcus said. And look at this. He pulled up more footage. This is from a security camera at a gas station 3 miles past the accident site. Timestamp 9:15 p.m., about 20 minutes after Sophie was hit. The same truck pulled into the frame. Even in the grainy footage, damage to the front driver's side was visible. There, Sophie breathed, pointing at the screen. That's the truck. I remember. That's what hit me. Marcus nodded. And here's the interesting part. Watch who gets out. The video showed someone exiting the truck. Small, young, definitely not an adult. That's Tyler, Sophie said with absolute certainty. That's Tyler Brennan. Ray leaned forward, studying the footage. Can you clean this up? Make it clearer. I can try, Marcus said, but even as is this is pretty damning. Minor driving truck registered to his father. Truck shows fresh damage. Timeline matches the accident perfectly. We need one more thing, Ray said. We need to prove Derek knew about this and covered it up. That's going to be harder, Marcus admitted. If Derek was smart, he didn't leave a paper trail. But he's arrogant, Ray said. Men like Derek always think they're untouchable. They get sloppy. Bear spoke up. I checked body shops today, asked around casual-like, found a guy who works at Morrison's Auto Body. He remembered that truck. Said Sheriff Brennan brought it in himself, paid cash, insisted on no paperwork. This was late November, 6 years ago. Did he say what the damage was? Ray asked. Front-end collision, driver's side. Needed a new bumper, headlight, and fender work. The mechanic said it looked like the truck had hit something organic, possibly a person. The room went very still. Did the mechanic report it? Grace asked. Bear shook his head. Said he mentioned it to Derek, and Derek told him it was a deer. The mechanic didn't believe him, but Derek's the sheriff, so he kept his mouth shut. Will he testify? Ray asked. I think so, Bear said. He's retiring next month, moving to Florida. Doesn't have to worry about Derek's retaliation anymore. Ray stood up, pacing. Okay, so we've got traffic camera footage showing the truck in the area, showing damage after the accident, showing Tyler driving. We've got a mechanic who can testify Derek paid cash for under-the-table repairs. We've got Tyler's confession to Sophie, even if it's hearsay. And we've got Derek's deliberately botched investigation. Is it enough? Grace asked. It's enough to take to the state police, Marcus said. Whether they'll act on it is another question. They'll act on it, Ray said with certainty, because we're not just going to the state police, we're going to the media. We're going to make this so public that Derek can't bury it. Sophie spoke up, her voice small but determined. Ray, if we do this, if we go public, Tyler's life is over. He'll go to jail. He was only 11 when it happened. Ray knelt down in front of her chair, meeting her eyes. Sophie, that's not your burden to carry. Tyler made a choice when he was 11, a bad choice. But Derek made a choice too when he covered it up. And Tyler's made choices every day for 6 years to keep lying, to keep tormenting you instead of confessing. At some point, consequences have to matter. But he's a kid, Sophie said. So were you, Ray said gently. And you lost your leg. You lost your father. You lost 6 years to fear and isolation. Tyler will face juvenile court, probably get counseling and community service. But you've already served a sentence you didn't deserve. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I don't want revenge. I just want it to stop. Then we stop it, Ray said, once and for all. The next morning, before they could move forward with their plan, Derek Brennan made his move. Ray woke to heavy pounding on his door. He opened it to find Derek Brennan standing on his porch, flanked by 2 deputies. Derek looked older than Ray remembered. 62 now, with more gray than brown in his hair, more weight around his mitten. But his eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, mean. Raymond Mitchell, Derek said, his voice dripping with false pleasantness. Been a long time. Not long enough, Ray replied. Derek's smile was sharp. I'm going to make this real simple. You and your biker friends are harassing my son. You're spreading false accusations, and you're interfering with a closed investigation. I'm exercising my rights as a citizen to investigate a crime that you deliberately buried. Derek's expression darkened. Careful, Ray. You're on thin ice. I could arrest you right now for intimidating a minor. Tyler's 17, hardly a minor. Legally, he is, and you've been stalking him, threatening him, turning a disabled girl against him. Sophie Delacroix isn't against anyone. She's the victim. Your son hit her with your truck 6 years ago, and you covered it up. Derek's face went red. That's a damn lie. Is it? Ray stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. He didn't want Sophie and Grace hearing this. Because I've got traffic camera footage showing your truck in the area the night of the accident. I've got footage showing fresh damage. I've got a mechanic who'll testify you paid cash for repairs and told him not to file paperwork. Derek's jaw clenched. You don't have shit. Try me. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you can come back to this town after 40 years and play hero? You think you can take me on? I've got resources you can't imagine, Ray. I've got judges in my pocket. I've got the whole damn county behind me. Maybe, Ray said, but I've got the truth, and I've got evidence, and I've got a girl who deserves justice. That girl, Derek hissed, is a troubled teenager making false accusations for attention. Everyone in this town knows it. She's been homeschooled because she can't handle normal school. She's isolated, probably depressed. Hell, maybe she threw that brick through her own window. Ray's hands clenched into fists. You're going to stand there and victim blame a 16-year-old girl who lost her leg because your son was joyriding in your truck. I'm going to stand here and tell you to back off, Derek said. Last warning, Ray. Drop this, leave town, or I will destroy you. I'll arrest you on every charge I can manufacture. I'll make sure you and your biker trash never ride through Montana again. You know what your problem is, Derek, Ray said quietly. You think power makes you untouchable. You've spent 46 years believing that. But power only works when people are too scared to challenge it. And I'm not scared of you anymore. Derek's smile was cruel. Then you're a fool. See you in court, Ray, or more likely in a cell. He turned and walked back to his patrol car, his deputies following. Ray stood on his porch watching them drive away, his heart pounding with rage and adrenaline. Inside, Marcus had heard everything. He's going to come after us hard now. I know, Ray said. We need to move fast. Get everything to the state police before he can sabotage us. Agreed, my son. Ray pulled out his phone. I'm calling a contact I have at the Billings Gazette, investigative journalist. If we can get the media involved, Derek won't be able to sweep this under the rug. You sure you want to do this? Bear asked. Once we go public, there's no taking it back. Ray looked toward the guest room where Sophie and Grace were sleeping. That girl has lived in fear and pain for 6 years because Derek Brennan protected his son. Yeah, I'm sure. He made the call. 3 hours later, Sophie sat in Ray's living room across from Rachel Torres, investigative journalist for the Billings Gazette. Rachel was 40, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for taking on corruption. Tell me everything. Rachel said, her recorder running. Sophie did. She told Rachel about the accident, about the failed investigation, about 6 years of wondering who had hit her, about Tyler's bullying, about his confession, about the brick through her window. Rachel listened, taking notes, asking pointed questions. When Sophie finished, Rachel turned to Ray. And you've got evidence. Marcus pulled out his laptop, showing her everything. The traffic camera footage, the gas station video, the mechanic's statement, the inconsistencies in Derek's investigation report. Rachel studied it all, her expression growing more serious. This is big, really big. Sheriff covering up his son's crime. This could take down the entire department. Will you run it? Ray asked. Rachel nodded. But I need to verify everything independently. Talk to the mechanic myself, get the original footage. Make sure it's airtight. How long will that take? A week, maybe 2. We don't have 2 weeks, Ray said. Derek's already threatened me. He's going to move against us. Then I'll work fast, Rachel promised. But I won't run a story this serious without being absolutely sure. If I get one fact wrong, Derek will use it to discredit everything. She turned to Sophie. Are you prepared for what happens when this story goes public? Your name will be everywhere. People will pick apart your life. Derek will try to destroy your credibility. Sophie looked at her mother, then at Ray. I've already lived through the worst thing I can imagine. I lost my leg. I lost my father. I lost 6 years to fear. What else can they take from me? Your peace, Rachel said gently. Your privacy, your sense of safety. I don't have those things anyway, Sophie said. At least this way I'll have the truth. Rachel nodded slowly. Okay, I'm in. Give me 1 week. I'll have the story ready to publish. After Rachel left, Sophie felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was fragile and terrifying, but it was there. The possibility that justice might actually exist. That truth might actually matter. Ray found her sitting on his back porch, staring at the mountains in the distance. You doing okay? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. I don't know, Sophie admitted. Part of me is excited. Part of me is terrified. And part of me still can't believe any of this is real. It's real, Ray assured her. And it's going to get harder before it gets better. Derek's going to fight back. Hard. You need to be ready for that. Sophie nodded. Ray, why are you doing this? Really, it's more than just Emma, isn't it? Ray was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, when I was your age, Derek Brennan made my life hell. 4 years of constant torment. And I ran away. I left town and told myself I'd moved on, but I never really dealt with it. Never stood up to him. He paused, his voice thick. And then Emma died, and I realized that running away from bullies doesn't stop them. It just gives them power over you, over everyone. I couldn't save Emma. I couldn't save myself at 17. But maybe I can save you. And in doing that, maybe I can finally save the kid I used to be. Sophie reached over and took Ray's weathered hand in her smaller one. You already saved me. You made me believe I was worth fighting for. That's everything. They sat there together as the sun set over Montana, a 64-year-old man and a 16-year-old girl, both carrying wounds that would never fully heal, both choosing to fight anyway. Because some things were worth the pain. Justice was one of them. Truth was another. And standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves was worth every risk. The war with Derek Brennan had officially begun. And Ray Thorne wasn't backing down. Not this time. Never again. Rachel Torres worked fast. 4 days after her interview with Sophie, she called Ray with an update. Her voice was tight with controlled excitement. I've got it, all of it. The mechanic confirmed everything on record. I tracked down the original traffic camera footage through a federal backup system Derek didn't know existed. And I found something else. Ray put her on speaker. Marcus Bear and Sophie gathered around. What else? Ray asked. Security footage from the hospital the night of Sophie's accident. Shows Derek arriving 40 minutes after Sophie was admitted. He goes straight to the records department, spends 20 minutes in there, then leaves. The next day, the accident report is filed with minimal information and the case is marked low priority. Sophie's breath caught. He was covering it up from the beginning. It looks that way, Rachel confirmed. I'm running the story tomorrow morning. Front page, but Sophie, there's something you need to know. I reached out to Derek for comment. He denied everything as expected, but then he said something that's going to be in the article. What did he say? Sophie asked, her voice small. He said you have been mentally unstable since the accident, that you've made false accusations before, that your mother has been coaching you to fabricate this story for a potential lawsuit. He's going to try to destroy your credibility. Sophie felt like she'd been punched. That's not true. None of that's true. I know, Rachel said gently, and the evidence supports you. But I wanted you to be prepared. When this story drops, Derek's going to come at you with everything he's got. After Rachel hung up, Sophie sat in silence. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We can still stop this, Grace said quietly. We can tell Rachel not to run the story. We can leave town, start over somewhere else. Sophie looked at her mother, this woman who'd sacrificed everything, who'd worked herself to exhaustion, who'd stayed when everyone else had left. No, Sophie said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm done running. I'm done being silent. Derek Brennan gets to lie about me, fine. Let him lie. The truth is bigger than his lies. Ray felt a surge of pride. This was the girl he'd met at the diner, broken and defeated, now finding her voice, her strength, her roar. That's my girl, he said. The story hit the Billings Gazette website at 6 a.m. the next morning. Sheriff accused of covering up son's hit and run that maimed teen girl by Rachel Torres. The article was devastating. Rachel had done her homework. She laid out the timeline, the evidence, the suspicious investigation. She included statements from the mechanic traffic camera stills, showing Tyler driving the damaged truck, and Derek's own words about the case being routine and properly closed. She also included Sophie's story, her photo sitting with her crutches, the bruise from Tyler's slap still visible on her face. Within an hour, the story had been picked up by the Associated Press. By noon, it was national news. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they all ran segments. Small-town sheriff accused of corruption. Disabled teen seeks justice after 6 years. When police protect their own. Sophie's phone exploded with messages. Friend requests on social media. Interview requests from national media. Supporters and trolls in equal measure. Grace's phone rang constantly. The hospital called. Her supervisor, voice apologetic but firm, said she was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation of the allegations. Code for Derek's brother-in-law was making his move, but they'd expected that. What they hadn't expected was the overwhelming public support. By evening, a crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office, 50 people, then 100, then 200, holding signs, demanding Derek's resignation, chanting, "Justice for Sophie." Local news crews captured it all. And then something else happened. Other victims started coming forward. A woman named Jennifer Martinez called the Billings Gazette claiming her son had been bullied by Tyler 3 years ago. When she'd reported it to the school, she'd been told the Brennan family was not to be bothered with trivial complaints. A man named Robert Chen said his daughter had been harassed by Tyler, and when he'd filed a police report, Derek himself had dismissed it as teenage drama. A former deputy came forward anonymously saying Derek had buried at least 4 complaints against Tyler over the years, all involving violence or harassment. The story wasn't just about Sophie anymore. It was about a pattern of corruption. A sheriff who'd used his power to protect his son from accountability for years. By the second day, the Montana Attorney General's office announced they were opening an investigation. Derek Brennan was suspended pending review, and then on the third day, Tyler broke. Sophie was at Ray's house trying to avoid the media circus when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello, heavy breathing, then Tyler's voice shaking and desperate. Sophie, it's Tyler. Please don't hang up. Sophie's hand tightened on the phone. Ray saw her expression and moved closer. What do you want? Sophie asked. I need to talk to you, please. Just please hear me out. Why should I? Because I need to tell you the truth, all of it. Not just what I admitted in the hallway, everything. Sophie looked at Ray. He nodded slowly, then gestured to his phone. Record this. Sophie put Tyler on speaker and started recording. I'm listening, she said. Tyler's voice cracked. I was 11. I was angry at my dad about something stupid, some punishment I thought was unfair. I took his truck keys while he was sleeping. I'd driven it before in empty parking lots. He'd taught me the basics. But I'd never driven on real roads. He paused, his breathing ragged. I was going too fast. It was dark. And then you were just there on your bike, and I tried to brake. But I hit you anyway. I heard you scream. I saw you fall. And I panicked. I drove away. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Hearing him describe it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I drove home, Tyler continued. My dad was awake by then. He saw the damage on the truck, saw me crying, and I told him everything. I thought he was going to kill me, but instead he hugged me, said it was going to be okay, said he'd handle it. He took the truck that night and hid it at my uncle's place 2 counties over. Then he made me promise I'd never tell anyone, ever. He said if I told, I'd go to jail, that my life would be over, that I needed to trust him to protect me. Tyler's voice broke completely. And I did. I trusted him. For 6 years, I kept the secret. But Sophie, it ate me alive. Every time I saw you, I remembered. And I hated myself. And I hated you for making me remember. So I hurt you again and again. Because if I could make you hurt as bad as I hurt, maybe it would feel less like my fault. Sophie was crying now, silently, tears streaming down her face. That's not an excuse, Tyler said quickly. There is no excuse. I'm a coward. I've been a coward since I was 11, and my dad made me into something worse. He taught me that power means never facing consequences, that lies are okay if they protect you, that hurting people is acceptable if you don't get caught. He took a shaking breath. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to the state police. I'm going to confess everything, and I'm going to testify against my dad. Because what he did was worse than what I did. I was a scared kid. He was the adult. He was supposed to teach me right from wrong. Instead, he taught me how to be just like him. Tyler, Sophie said, her voice thick, why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it from me. Not from a lawyer, not in a courtroom. You deserve to hear me say that I'm sorry, that I destroyed your life, that I took your leg and your father and 6 years of happiness, and that no amount of apology will ever make that right. Sophie closed her eyes. No, it won't. I know. Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. But I'm going to try anyway. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than the person my father made me. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Sophie said something that surprised even herself. Tyler, you were 11 years old. You made a terrible mistake. But your father made a choice. Every day for 6 years, he chose to lie, to cover up, to let me suffer while protecting you. What you did was wrong. What he did was evil. I know, Tyler said. I can forgive the 11-year-old who panicked and ran. Sophie continued slowly working through her feelings in real time. I can even understand the 17-year-old who lashed out because he couldn't handle his guilt. But Tyler, you have to face what you did. Really face it. Not just confess and hope it goes away. You have to make amends, real ones. I will, Tyler promised. However long it takes, whatever it costs, I will. After Tyler hung up, Sophie sat in stunned silence. Ray put a hand on her shoulder. You okay? I don't know, Sophie admitted. Part of me is angry he called. Part of me is glad he did. Part of me wants him to suffer. And part of me just feels sad. Sad for everyone this has hurt. That's called being human, Ray said gently. Justice and mercy aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. True to his word, Tyler turned himself in to the Montana State Police that afternoon. He was arrested, processed, and held in juvenile detention pending charges. His confession, recorded and witnessed, detailed everything. The joyride, the accident, his father's cover-up, the years of lies. The confession was devastating for Derek Brennan. Within hours, the Attorney General announced criminal charges against Derek: obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, abuse of power, each charge carrying potential prison time. Derek was arrested at his home that evening in front of news cameras in handcuffs. The image of the sheriff being perp-walked to a state police cruiser went viral instantly. His empire of corruption crumbled in less than a week. But Sophie's battle was just beginning. The media attention was overwhelming. Camera crews camped outside Ray's house. Reporters shouted questions every time Sophie stepped outside. Her social media was flooded with thousands of messages. Support, hate, everything in between. Derek's supporters, and there were many, launched a campaign to discredit Sophie. They called her a liar, an attention seeker, a girl who'd fabricated everything for money. They dug through her life, finding photos of her looking thin and using them as proof of mental instability. The harassment was relentless. Someone created a fake social media account in Sophie's name, posting cruel things. Someone else photoshopped her image into pornographic pictures. Her mother's workplace was inundated with calls demanding Grace be fired for raising a liar. It got so bad that Ray and his crew took turns standing guard outside the house, making sure no one got too close. Sophie felt herself cracking under the pressure. 1 week after the story broke, she had a panic attack, full-blown hyperventilating, convinced she was dying. Grace held her while Ray called an ambulance. At the hospital, a doctor prescribed anxiety medication and recommended therapy. Is it worth it? Sophie asked Ray as they drove home. All this pain, all this attention, all this hatred, is it worth it just to prove I was right? Ray pulled the car over, turned to face her. Sophie, listen to me. What you're going through right now, it's the hardest part. When you stand up to power, power fights back. Derek and his supporters are trying to break you because they know if you break, their lies win. But I feel broken, Sophie whispered. You're not broken, you're bending. There's a difference. Bending means you're still flexible, still strong. Broken means you've given up, and you haven't given up. How do you know? Because you're still here, still fighting, still showing up. That's not broken. That's a warrior. Sophie wiped her eyes. I'm not a warrior. I'm just a scared kid who wants this to be over. Warriors are scared kids who keep fighting anyway, Ray said. You think I wasn't terrified when I went to war? I was 19 years old carrying a rifle I barely knew how to use, facing people who wanted me dead. But I fought because the alternative was giving up. And you don't give up, Sophie Delacroix. It's not in your DNA. Sophie managed a weak smile. You're very good at pep talks. I've had a lot of practice, Ray said, thinking of Emma, wishing he'd given her this talk 23 years ago. They sat in the parked car for a few more minutes, watching the Montana sky turn purple with sunset. Finally, Sophie said, what happens next? Next, which Ray said, We wait for the trial, we testify, we tell the truth, and we let justice do its job. And if justice fails, then we tried, and sometimes trying is enough. The preliminary hearings began 3 weeks later. Tyler Brennan, charged as a juvenile for vehicular assault and leaving the scene of an accident, pled guilty. His lawyer argued for leniency given his age at the time of the crime and his cooperation with authorities. The judge sentenced him to 2 years in juvenile detention, followed by 3 years of probation. He would also be required to complete 500 hours of community service at adaptive sports facilities, working directly with disabled youth. It wasn't a harsh sentence. Many people thought it was too lenient, but Sophie understood. Tyler had been 11. He'd been manipulated by his father, and he'd ultimately chosen truth over continued lies. Derek Brennan's trial was different. Derek fought hard. He hired expensive lawyers who attacked every piece of evidence. They claimed the traffic camera footage was manipulated. They discredited the mechanic's testimony. They painted Sophie as a troubled girl with a vendetta. But the evidence was overwhelming. Tyler's confession corroborated Sophie's story. The mechanic's testimony was backed by bank records showing Derek's cash payment. The hospital security footage showed Derek's suspicious behavior. Most damning was Derek's own investigation report. When examined by forensic analysts, it was clear he deliberately avoided obvious leads, failed to follow protocol, and closed the case prematurely. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Sophie testified on day 4. She walked into the courtroom on her crutches, wearing a simple blue dress her mother had bought for the occasion. The room was packed. Media, supporters, Derek's family, curious onlookers. Derek sat at the defense table, his face impassive. But when Sophie entered, she saw his jaw clench. She took the stand, was sworn in, and then the prosecutor began asking questions. Sophie told her story, the accident, the pain, the surgeries, her father leaving, 6 years of not knowing who had hit her, the bullying, Tyler's confession, the brick through her window. She spoke clearly, calmly, looking directly at the jury. When the defense attorney cross-examined her, he was aggressive. "Isn't it true, Miss Delacroix, that you've been homeschooled due to behavioral issues?" "No, I've been homeschooled because Tyler Brennan and his friends made school unbearable." "You have a history of depression, don't you?" "I have a history of being a disabled teenager whose father abandoned her and whose attacker was never caught." Depression seems like a reasonable response. "You stand to gain financially from a civil lawsuit against my client, correct?" "I stand to gain truth. Money can't give me back my leg, or my father, or 6 years of my life." The attorney tried to rattle her, but Sophie held firm. Every attack she deflected with calm, simple honesty. When she stepped down, Ray saw the jury's faces. They believed her. The verdict came on day 14. Derek Brennan guilty on all counts. Obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, abuse of power, criminal conspiracy. Sentencing would come later, but the guidelines suggested 8 to 12 years in prison. When the verdict was read, Derek's face crumbled. His wife sobbed. His supporters sat in stunned silence. Sophie felt empty, not triumphant, not relieved, just empty. She'd won. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel the way she'd imagined. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Sophie stood on the steps with her mother and Ray camera flashes going off like lightning. A reporter shouted, "Sophie, how do you feel about the verdict?" Sophie looked at the cameras, at the crowd, at the whole circus of attention, and she spoke. "I feel sad," she said simply. "Sad that it took 6 years to get here. Sad that a man chose to protect his son by destroying me. Sad that Tyler lost his childhood to guilt and his father lost everything to pride. There are no winners here, just people who've been hurt. And I hope we can all start healing now." Another reporter, "Will you pursue a civil lawsuit?" "No," Sophie said, surprising everyone, including Grace. "I don't want money. I wanted truth. I have that now." "What's next for you?" Sophie looked at Ray, then at her mother, then back at the cameras. "I'm going to live my life. I'm going to finish high school. I'm going to apply to art school. I'm going to stop being defined by what was done to me and start being defined by what I choose to do next." She paused, then added, "And I'm going to help other people who've been silenced. Because I learned something through all this. The most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be quiet. Your voice is your weapon. Use it." The clip went viral within hours. Sophie Delacroix, the girl who'd been slapped in a diner and hit by a truck in silence for 6 years, had found her roar. 2 months after Derek's conviction, the Iron Brotherhood organized a charity ride. Word spread through the motorcycle community. A ride to support Sophie to raise money for disabled youth programs to celebrate justice finally being served. They expected maybe 50 bikes. 600 showed up. Motorcycles lined the streets of Miller's Creek for half a mile. Bikers from Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, even California and Texas. They came wearing leather and patches, bearing gifts and donations. The ride started at Miller's Diner, where it had all begun. Rita had decorated the diner with banners, "Justice for Sophie." Strength through voice. She provided free coffee and pie for all 600 bikers. Sophie stood outside, overwhelmed by the sight. 600 people had come. For her, to support her, to celebrate her courage. Ray stood beside her, prayer on her other side. The rest of the Iron Brotherhood formed a protective semicircle. "You ready?" Ray asked. Sophie nodded, though she wasn't sure ready was the right word. Marcus approached carrying a large box. "Before we start the ride, we have something for you." He opened the box carefully. Inside was a prosthetic leg, state-of-the-art, custom designed, beautifully crafted with blue and silver accents. Sophie gasped. "I can't. This must have cost." "Doesn't matter what it," Kate Bear rumbled. "You deserve it." Sophie touched the prosthetic reverently. Then she noticed the engraving on the side, written in elegant script, "Strength through voice," from the girl who learned to roar. Her eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect." "Put it on," Ray encouraged. With Grace's help, Sophie removed her old prosthetic and attached the new one. It fit perfectly, molded to her specific measurements. Lightweight, responsive, revolutionary. She stood, took a tentative step, then another. For the first time in 6 years, walking didn't hurt, didn't feel awkward, felt almost normal. Sophie took 10 steps, 20, walked around the diner parking lot, tears streaming down her face, laughing and crying at the same time. 600 bikers cheered. Grace sobbed with joy. Ray watched with fierce pride, thinking of Emma, wishing she could see this, wishing she'd had someone to stand up for her the way he'd stood up for Sophie. When Sophie returned to where Ray stood, she threw her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for believing me, for protecting me, for teaching me I was worth fighting for." Ray hugged her back, this girl who'd become like a daughter to him, this girl who'd given him a chance at redemption he didn't deserve but would spend the rest of his life honoring. "You saved yourself," he said grisly. "I just gave you a push." The ride began. 600 motorcycles, engines roaring in perfect symphony. They rode through Miller's Creek, past the courthouse, past the sheriff's office, where Derek had once ruled unchallenged, past Sophie's old school. They rode for 2 hours, a massive parade of solidarity and strength. Along the route, people lined the streets. Some held signs supporting Sophie. Others just watched in awe. A few Derek's remaining supporters looked away. But most people cheered. Because Sophie's story had touched something deep in the community, had exposed corruption they'd all known about but been too afraid to challenge, had shown that one person, one voice could change everything. The ride ended at the county fairgrounds, where a celebration had been organized. Food trucks, music, booths for various disability advocacy groups, and a stage where Sophie had been asked to speak. She hadn't wanted to. Public speaking terrified her. But Ray had encouraged her. "People need to hear from you, need to know that standing up works." So Sophie climbed onto the stage, her new prosthetic giving her confidence she hadn't felt before. She stood before a crowd of over 1,000 people. Bikers, families, community members, media. Sophie took the microphone, her hands shook. Then she saw Ray in the front row giving her a thumbs up. She took a breath and spoke. "6 years ago, someone hit me with their truck and drove away. I lost my leg. I lost my father. I lost my sense of safety. For 6 years, I lived in fear. Fear of going outside. Fear of asking questions. Fear of being seen." Her voice grew stronger. "And then one day I went to a diner, and a boy slapped me, and nobody did anything. Nobody stood up, nobody helped, and I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life." She paused, looking around at the crowd. "But then 5 bikers walked in, and one of them, Ray Thorne, saw me, really saw me. Not as a disabled girl, not as a victim, but as someone worth protecting, someone worth fighting for. Applause rippled through the crowd. Ray taught me something important. He taught me that strength isn't about being tough enough to handle pain alone. It's about being brave enough to ask for help, to speak up, to refuse to be silenced. Sophie's voice cracked with emotion. For 6 years, I was silent. I accepted that nobody cared, that my pain didn't matter, that justice wasn't for people like me. But Ray showed me I was wrong. Justice is for everyone, but you have to fight for it. You have to use your voice. She looked directly at the camera crews recording her speech. To every person watching this who's been hurt, who's been bullied, who's been told to shut up and accept it. I'm telling you, don't accept it. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. You matter. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's not. Standing up cost me. It cost my mother her job. It cost us our privacy. It brought harassment and hate and pain. But you know what? It was worth it. Because for the first time in 6 years, I'm not afraid. I'm not hiding. I'm standing here on a prosthetic leg that says, strength through voice, in front of 1,000 people, and I'm not scared. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained steady. I learned something else too. I learned that one person standing up can inspire others. Since my story went public, 17 other victims of Tyler and Derek Brennan have come forward. 17 people who thought they were alone, who thought nobody would believe them. They found their voices because I found mine. Sophie took a shaking breath. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm starting a foundation, the Emma Rose Foundation, named after Ray's daughter, who he lost to bullying. We're going to provide legal support for victims of bullying and corruption. We're going to give them resources, advocacy, and most importantly, we're going to tell them what Ray told me. You are not alone. You are not powerless, and you deserve justice. The crowd erupted. Standing ovation, cheers, people crying openly. Sophie stood there, overwhelmed, her mother rushing onto the stage to embrace her, Ray not far behind. In that moment, Sophie understood. This was what healing looked like, not forgetting, not erasing the pain, but transforming it into something meaningful, taking the worst thing that had ever happened to her and using it to help others. She'd lost her leg at 10. She'd lost her voice at 16. But at 16 and a half, she'd found something more powerful than either. She'd found purpose. 3 months later, Sophie received a letter. It was from the Montana State Juvenile Detention Center, from Tyler Brennan. She almost threw it away, but curiosity made her open it. Dear Sophie, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond, but I needed to write it anyway. I'm 3 months into my sentence. 2 years feels like forever when you're living it, but it feels like nothing compared to what I took from you. I've been going to therapy 3 times a week, court-ordered, but I do it anyway. My therapist says I need to separate what I did at 11 from what I did after. That the accident was a child's mistake, but the bullying was a choice. She's right. I spent 6 years punishing you for my guilt, making you suffer because I couldn't handle my own pain. That wasn't the 11-year-old who panicked. That was the 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old who chose cruelty over confession. I can't undo that. I can't give you back your leg or your father or those 6 years, but I can try to be better. I've been assigned to work with disabled youth as part of my community service. At first, I hated it. Every kid I met reminded me of what I did to you. But slowly, I started to see them not as reminders of my guilt, but as people. People who deserve patience and respect and kindness. There's a kid here named Marcus, 8 years old. Lost his arm in a farming accident. His father left after just like yours did. Marcus is angry at the world, hurts himself, lashes out. I see so much of myself in him, both the guilt and the misplaced rage. I've been working with Marcus for 6 weeks now, teaching him that his disability doesn't define him, that he's more than what happened to him. And in teaching him, I'm learning the same lessons. You said something at the trial that stuck with me. You said there are no winners, just people who've been hurt. You were right. My father destroyed our family, trying to protect me. My mother lost her husband. I lost my freedom and my future. You lost 6 years. We're all casualties of his choice to cover up instead of teaching me accountability. But here's what I'm learning, Sophie. Hurt people can heal. It takes time and work and facing really ugly truths about yourself. But it's possible. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am asking for something else. I'm asking you to know that your courage changed me. Watching you stand up, speak out, refuse to be silent. It showed me what real strength looks like. You could have wanted revenge, could have demanded the harshest sentence possible. Instead, you chose truth and justice and grace. That grace saved me, made me want to be better than the person my father raised me to be. When I get out, I'm going to spend the rest of my life working with disabled youth. It won't erase what I did. Nothing can. But maybe I can help kids like Marcus. And in helping them, maybe I can honor what you taught me about using pain for purpose instead of destruction. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you for showing me that accountability isn't the end of someone's life. It's the beginning of a better one. I hope you're healing too. I hope art school happens. I hope the foundation helps thousands of people. I hope you find happiness. You deserve all of that and more. Tyler Sophie read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. She didn't respond, wasn't ready to, maybe never would be. But she kept it. Because Tyler was right. Hurt people could heal, and healing looked different for everyone. For Tyler, it meant facing his actions and working to make amends. For Sophie, it meant building something meaningful from her pain. For Ray, it meant finding peace with Emma's death by protecting others. For Grace, it meant watching her daughter transform from victim to advocate. Healing wasn't linear. It wasn't complete. But it was happening. 1 year after the diner incident, Sophie's life looked completely different. She'd finished high school with honors, had been accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design with a full scholarship. The Emma Rose Foundation had helped 37 families navigate bullying and corruption cases, winning justice in 22 of them. Grace had found a new job at a hospital 2 counties over with better pay and administration that actually supported her. They'd moved to a small house with a yard, something Grace had always dreamed of, but never thought they could afford. The Iron Brotherhood had expanded their charity work, opening 3 Emma's House locations across Montana. Safe spaces where bullied and at-risk youth could find support, counseling, and community. And Ray had found something he thought he'd lost when Emma died. He'd found peace. The guilt didn't disappear. It never would. But it had transformed. Instead of being a weight that crushed him, it had become a reminder, a purpose. Emma's death hadn't been meaningless. It had led him to Sophie, and Sophie's survival had helped dozens of others. On the anniversary of the diner incident, Ray and Sophie visited Emma's grave together. Sophie placed flowers, fresh roses, Emma's favorite according to Ray. "Emma," Sophie said quietly, addressing the headstone. "I never met you, but your dad talks about you all the time, about how smart you were, how kind, how much you loved to read." She paused, her hand resting on the cool stone. "He says he failed you, that he didn't listen when you needed him. And maybe that's true, but Emma, he saved me. He heard me when I needed someone to listen. He stood up for me when everyone else looked away. And in doing that, he saved himself too." Sophie's voice cracked. "So I guess what I want to say is thank you. Thank you for teaching your dad, even in the hardest way possible, that listening matters, that protecting vulnerable people matters, that standing up to bully matters. Because of what he learned from losing you, I got to keep my life." Ray stood beside her, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I wish you'd gotten to grow up," Sophie continued. "I wish you'd gotten to go to college and fall in love and have the life you deserved. But since you didn't, I'm going to live enough for both of us. I'm going to speak up enough for both of us. And I'm going to make sure your name lives on through every person the foundation helps." She stepped back, taking Ray's hand. They stood there in silence for a long time, the Montana wind cold around them, the mountains in the distance, the sky impossibly blue. Finally, Ray spoke. "She'd like you, kiddo. She'd like you a lot." "I would have liked her too," Sophie said. They walked back to Ray's motorcycle. Sophie had graduated to wearing her prosthetic full-time, now could walk without crutches for short distances. She still used them for longer treks, but the new leg had given her mobility and confidence she'd never had before. Ray handed her a helmet. "You ready?" Sophie looked at the motorcycle, something that had terrified her a year ago. Now it represented freedom. I'm ready. She climbed on behind Ray, wrapping her arms around his waist. The engine roared to life, that deep rumble that had once seemed threatening but now felt like protection, like power. They rode through Miller's Creek, past the diner where it all started, past the courthouse where justice had been served, past the school where Sophie had been tormented. All of it looked different now, smaller, less frightening, because Sophie was different, bigger, braver, unbowed. They rode out of town onto the open highway, the Montana landscape stretching endless before them, mountains and sky and possibility. Sophie threw her arms out to the side, trusting Ray to keep her safe, feeling the wind whip through her hair, feeling alive and free and powerful. She tilted her head back and laughed, a full, joyous laugh that came from somewhere deep inside. The laugh of someone who'd been broken but had chosen to heal, who'd been silenced but had found her voice, who'd been a victim but had become a survivor, then an advocate, then a force of nature. Ray heard that laugh and smiled. This was what redemption sounded like. Not perfect, not complete, but real. They rode for hours, no destination in mind, just the road and the freedom and the knowledge that they'd fought and won. Not against Tyler, though he'd been defeated. Not against Derek, though he was in prison. They'd won against something bigger. They'd won against the idea that power always wins, that corruption can't be challenged, that one voice doesn't matter. They'd proven that truth is stronger than lies, that courage is contagious, that standing up even when you're terrified, even when the cost is high, even when you might lose everything. Standing up changes the world. One person at a time, one voice at a time, one roar at a time. As the sun set over Montana, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold, Sophie thought about everything that had happened, everything she'd lost, everything she'd gained. She'd lost her leg, but she'd gained strength. She'd lost her father, but she'd gained Ray, who was more of a father than her biological one had ever been. She'd lost 6 years to fear, but she'd gained a lifetime of purpose. Fair trade, numb. It would never be fair. She'd have given anything to have her leg back, to have never been hit, to have lived those 6 years differently. But since she couldn't change the past, she'd done the only thing she could. She'd changed the future. For herself. For the 17 victims who'd come forward after her. For the 37 families the foundation had helped. For every person who'd heard her story and found the courage to speak their own truth. Sophie Delacroix had learned to roar, and the world had listened. Epilogue. 5 years later, Sophie stood in her art studio in Providence, Rhode Island. 21 years old, college graduate, published author, advocate, artist. Her memoir, Learning to Roar, had been on the New York Times bestseller list for 14 weeks. The Emma Rose Foundation, now operated in 12 states, had helped over 300 families and employed a staff of 25. Sophie still used a prosthetic leg, still had scars, physical and emotional, still had bad days when the phantom pain was overwhelming and the memories felt too heavy. But she also had good days, great days. Days where she woke up grateful for her life, for her work, for the people who'd stood beside her. Ray called every Sunday. He was 69 now, still riding, still running the Iron Brotherhood, still showing up for people who needed him. He and Grace had become close over the years, though both insisted they were just friends. Sophie saw through that, but didn't push. They'd figure it out in their own time. Tyler had been released after serving his full sentence. He'd enrolled in a community college majoring in social work. He worked at a nonprofit for disabled youth, lived quietly, kept his head down. They didn't talk often, but once a year on the anniversary of the accident, Tyler sent Sophie a letter. Update on his life. Expression of continued remorse. Promise to keep being better. Sophie read them but rarely responded. Forgiveness was a process, not a destination. Derek Brennan was 6 years into an 8-year sentence. He'd be eligible for parole in 2 years. Sophie had already submitted a statement opposing his release. Some people didn't deserve second chances, especially when they'd shown no remorse. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Hi, Sophie. My name is Maria. I'm 14. My stepdad is a police officer who's been hurting my mom, and no one will help because they're scared of him. I saw your TED Talk. You said anyone who needed help could reach out. So I'm reaching out. Please. Sophie's heart clenched. She immediately called the foundation's crisis line, giving them Maria's information, making sure someone would follow up within the hour. Then she texted back, "Maria, help is coming. You are not alone. You are not powerless. Thank you for being brave enough to ask. That's the hardest part. You're going to be okay." Three dots appeared then. "Thank you. I was so scared to text you." "I know. I was scared once too. But I learned something important. Fear doesn't make you weak. Acting despite fear makes you strong. You're already stronger than you know." Sophie set her phone down and returned to her work. She was preparing for an art show, her first solo exhibition. The theme, Hands That Hold Us. Every painting featured hands. Hands reaching, hands supporting, hands holding, hands letting go. The centerpiece was a painting titled "The Day Angels Wore Leather." It showed a large weathered hand reaching down toward a smaller hand holding a crutch. The background was the interior of Miller's diner, blurred but recognizable. The light in the painting seemed to emanate from the hands themselves. It was Ray's hand and Sophie's hand. The moment everything changed. Sophie stepped back, studying the painting with a critical eye. It was good, maybe the best work she'd ever done. Because it was true. That day at Miller's diner, a girl who'd been broken found someone willing to help her heal. A man carrying decades of guilt found a chance at redemption. And two people separated by age and experience and circumstance had formed a bond that changed both their lives. Sophie's story had started with a slap in a truck and 6 years of silence. But it hadn't ended there. It had ended with a voice that refused to be quiet, with courage that inspired others, with justice that proved the system could work even if it took time. Most importantly, it had ended with a girl who'd been told she was broken, learning the most important truth of all: scars don't mean you're broken, they mean you survived. And survival, when wielded with purpose and voice and determination, is the most powerful thing in the world. Sophie picked up her brush and added one final detail to the painting. On the cuff of Ray's leather jacket, barely visible unless you look it closely, she painted three words: Emma's daughter too. Because that's what she'd become. Emma's sister in spirit. The daughter Ray got a second chance to protect. The girl who proved that sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. Sophie smiled, set down her brush, and pulled out her phone. She texted Ray, "Thank you for everything, today and always." His response came immediately. "Right back at you, kiddo. Proud of you. Emma would be too." Sophie looked at those words, feeling the weight of them, the love in them, the truth. She'd lost her leg at 10, lost her voice at 16, found both at 16 and a half, with the help of a biker who understood that redemption comes from standing up for others. And now at 21, she was exactly who she was meant to be. Not despite what had happened to her, because of it. The girl who'd learned to roar had become a woman whose roar echoed across the country, giving courage to thousands who needed to find their own voices. And she was just getting started.